Hey guys, I wanted to kind of share my personal thoughts and experience. Sorry, I got something in my eye. My personal thoughts and experience about the coof and the healthy, happy, jibby jabby medicine. I think we all know what I'm talking about. So while I do, while I did work in the COVID ICU, I've been a respiratory therapist for 23 years. I treated 300 COVID-19 patients in the ICU. But this has nothing to do with my medical training. It has nothing to do with how I treated those patients, my opinions, my assumptions, my misinformation, possibly. I might be wrong on many accounts. Has nothing to do with how I treated the patients. I'm not a physician. I'm not a virologist. So I'm just a respiratory therapist. So I'm speaking like a non-professional. I'm speaking truly just my intuitions, my experience, and that's about it. It's a sad state of affairs when I'm even nervous about talking about it very carefully with plenty of disclaimers. Um, you know, it's just intimidating that we have no more freedom of speech on so many levels about certain ideologies that have crept in, especially into the West. So I find it highly suspicious that the Wuhan lab that was in Wuhan that was testing coronaviruses among obviously other bacteria and stuff like that, or other viruses. Like I said, I'm not a virologist. I think that any discerning adult would raise an eyebrow to the fact that, well, they're saying it's from a wet market, but there's a virology lab over there that does gain of function on coronaviruses. Don't forget, coronaviruses there's plenty of them. That's why it's SARS-CoV-19. It's a specific strain. There's many coronaviruses out there. And to my knowledge, they've never been able to find a vaccination specifically for coronaviruses. I remember seeing the physician with the nasal cannulas talking, and he died. He was from the virology lab in Wuhan. Another lady was concerned that it could have possibly come out. These were early information that was coming out before it ended up getting banned as misinformation and pretty much taken off of social media. So personally, as a non-professional that might be wrong on it, but my suspicion was that it was highly probable that it came from a gain-of-function virology lab in Wuhan instead of some wet market. If this was a zoonotic virus, its origins being animal and eventually mutated to be transmissible to humans, I would have expected a lot more of the zoonotic kingdom to become sick with respiratory illnesses, animals, dogs, cats, all sorts of various animals, coughing, choking, cattle dying from respiratory issues and hypoxemia, clotting in animals. This is what I would have expected if it originated by eating bats. So that's my first suspicion. That's my opinion. I may be misinformed. I'm not stating truths. I'm stating my opinions, misguided or not, and I'm stating my experience of what happened over the last couple of years. I was very concerned about the vaccine. I was very concerned about the new technology that they were calling a vaccine, the messenger RNA. I was concerned more about long-term side effects. My wife works in preclinical research, animal testing before it goes to human trials. The virologists there, the biochemists, a lot of the professionals in that preclinical testing facility were like, no way. It takes at least 7 years before you even think of starting to inject things in humans. Yet within 1 year, there was a vaccine using a new technology that, to my knowledge, was never used on humans. That was a concern of mine. And I looked at my age, my risk factors, and I decided that I would rather not take the chance with the vaccine. If it takes 7 years for a new medication or more to reach human trials, I wasn't comfortable with a non-FDA approved a messenger RNA vaccine that was brought in roughly a year in. I really didn't want to risk taking that. I wouldn't have shared that. I wouldn't have told people or tried to discourage them, really, because I'm not a virologist, and maybe I was wrong, but personally, that was my instinct. I caught the first strain of COVID, and I was extremely sick. I lost 20 pounds. I was not able to eat solid food. My appetite was completely gone. I felt like vomiting, eating solid food. I was just making smoothies and protein shakes with eggs, so kind of liquid. Lost 20 pounds, slept 3 days. I was very sick. I caught it actually pretty bad. I had a pulse oximeter that I put on my finger. I can go get it. So the pulse oximeter measures how much of your red blood cells are carrying oxygen. So if it's 100% your saturation, it means that 100% of your hemoglobin are transporting oxygen. Once you approach 90%, it drops quite rapidly, your oxygen saturation. Mine is 98, and I don't know if you would really see it well. There we go. SpO2 98. So mine was 90. That was in bed. I wasn't really short of breath, but I could only breathe shallow, and I was panting. I slept for days and days, and my oxygen levels were low. If I took a deep breath, hurt my lungs, and I would cough. So I got really, really sick, actually. What I saw in the ICU was definitely something that I had never seen. The CT scans, the clinical manifestations, the clotting. Primarily, a lot of people don't even know that the reason that it created such low oxygen levels in the blood was not actually the air sacs within your lungs that were affected initially, at least initially. It was the capillaries around the alveoli. So the blood that is traveling through the lung so that it can connect with those air sacs and diffuse gas across. So what was happening was there was clots, tons and tons of clots. And it also caused the immune system in many people to overreact releasing cytokines. Cytokines usually are kind of fighter cells that would go and destroy and poison, in a way, put it in simple terms, to fight off pathogens. But if it's an overreaction, it floods your body with cytokines, and this severely damages especially your vessels. And because of that, you have capillary and vessel damage, inflammation. You have this clotting that is occurring. So especially throughout the lungs, it was primarily, I would say, a pulmonary vascular issue. That's why the intubations that we did for the first 2 weeks, before we figured that now that's not the course to take, because the lung is compliant. The lung is actually supple. It's just full of mini clots, sometimes very large clots too. So I am not denying that there was a virus. The CT scans showed the typical things. It was just a pathophysiology, a course that we saw over and over in these patients. I have a friend that said, it's probably the masks, people just wearing those masks. I don't think it was that healthy, especially people who were wearing these like dirty, nasty, stained masks, breathing petri dish. I'm not denying that. It's probably true. It definitely did not create the symptoms and the pathophysiology that I saw with the original strain and maybe the 2 or 3. Definitely COVID, as the strains variants became a lot less deadly for the patients that got into the ICU. I saw a lot of elderly people with comorbidities. Seemed like obesity, diabetes especially, even in young people, made them quite vulnerable. I saw many people die. We could maybe 20%, when they got into the ICU, maybe 20% came out, no matter what we did. Intubate them, don't intubate them. It seemed like we could tell if the oxygen delivery that we were giving, the concentration was on 100, and they stayed stuck there for 10 days. Some of them lasted 7 days. Some of them lasted a month. Some of them intubated lasted 3 months. Those were rare. But we knew if the oxygen wasn't going down even a little bit at a time, they're stuck at 100, that they were dead. They just didn't know it. And we had to speak with these people knowing that they would die. And the restrictions were horrible, right? Like, families weren't able to have funerals at the start. Families weren't able to even visit. So people would die. I can't imagine. So I'm not denying the virus either. My assumption, like I said, is that I don't think that it came from a wet market. I think it came from a lab. And I think that many people think that. So I caught the original strain, and I was like so happy, because I said to myself, well, if a vaccine does come, maybe I'll be exempt because I caught it. I figured natural immunity is better than any vaccine, which I still believe is true. Why it was being denied is, I think we all understand why that was being told. When the vaccine did come out, it was voluntary. And when all the voluntary people got it, then phase 2 started. And I was scared of that. And people said, no, they'll never force you. Yeah, well, they might not come with a gun at your door to stab you in the shoulder, but they can force you and coerce you indirectly. That's exactly what happened. Threatened, people lost employment, people were fired. And that's what happened. It started that people, and like, I'm not saying that this was my work establishment. These were government mandates, so nothing against my establishment. It was the powers above that I have issue with. So what happened was it started with the testing. If you're not vaccinated, you have to be tested with the nasal. It's quite painful, actually, 3 times a week, indefinitely. Who knows, for a year, whatever, I don't know. So that's pretty much what I did. And I kept my opinion to myself. Certainly didn't talk at the hospital about my personal opinion on things. There's no reason to debate it. And as you can see, people that did talk with other people on the opposing side, families were fractured. Friends didn't speak to each other. Neighbors started shunning each other. Hate over the unvaccinated. All sorts of horrible things, dehumanizing the unvaccinated. Now, actually, I've noticed that it's reversed. Now there's people that are unvaccinated that are hateful against the vaccinated, calling them horrible people, playing into the system. I'm not opposed to the vaccine. I saw many older comorbidity people dying. I figured, maybe if you're in your 60s or 70s, maybe you should take a chance. I don't know. I didn't discourage anybody from getting it. I didn't encourage anybody to get it. I kind of shut my mouth, shared my opinion among friends, among my family members. Not getting into being a healthcare professional, but I certainly didn't volunteer to work in the vaccination centers. And I don't think that people that got vaccinated should be shunned or should be criticized. And I don't think the people that were unvaccinated should be criticized or shunned. And I don't think that people should make a spiritual issue out of it. Sure, a lot of Christians have faith that God created this body and it's miraculous. And a lot of Christians very strong about natural immunity. There was many Christians that were on the opposite page because the vaccine really wasn't a spiritual or religious issue. Just as many Christians that were vaccinated. So yeah, I even experienced online somebody totally destroy me, calling me scum of the earth for having taken the vaccination. So I did take the vaccination. I took the vaccination because there was a deadline where if we did not take it, the government mandate stated that we would be suspended without pay. I tried to hold out as long as I could with the testing I did. And as the deadline approached, looking at the debt, looking at a lot of personal issues, 3 years of, I know we all have issues, but 3 years of just one crisis in our personal life after another. My wife, very nice career in preclinical testing, was been unable to work for the last 3 years. She was getting salary insurance, but when COVID arrived, something screwed up and we couldn't get doctor appointments. The file was closed. Make it a short story. It's more complicated than that. Her family doctor didn't fill out the papers at all. And the insurance, after 3 appeals, said, no, you're not getting the money. And we lost a year's salary. I went through all of my savings, our nest, for emergencies, that was, and our hydro was shut down and we owed $6,000. So I had to borrow money to get that. So I said to myself, if if I get long-term complications from it, I'm willing to poison myself for my family to support them. Michelle didn't need to get vaccinated. She didn't work, so she couldn't lose her job. My youngest was against it. He didn't get it. My oldest, which was 15 at the time? I don't even think he was 16. Got it without my consent or Michelle's consent. They were just offering it at school. Hey, you want the Jibby jab? My son said, I want it because I want to play sports. Well, he got it. I guess parents don't have, authority to control what kids do anymore, which is disgusting in my opinion. More and more the state is taking away parental rights. The government, schools propagandizing children with harmful ideologies. So I ended up taking it, and I felt violated. I felt coerced, felt betrayed. I felt that my freedoms were being taken away. And it really had a negative effect. It took a lot for me to get it. I felt like a loser. I felt like somebody with no balls. So that's my experience with the Jibby Jabby. So I have this middle of the road thing. Some people go as far as to say like COVID doesn't exist. It didn't exist at all. It was just a flu. That's not true. I've seen one person in the ICU die of the flu. Influenza, coming in strictly influenza, ICU care, died because of that. No, we don't see that. We don't see that seasonally at all. COVID, we saw 300 people in 2 years. Always the same symptoms, the same results, D-dimer elevation, CT scans showing massive inflammations, clotting. Also, labs were over and over the same thing. They presented similarly. This was not because we were wearing masks, even though it's pretty gross to think about how long people wear those masks. Let's check some stuff out. Again, this is just my opinion as a human being on Earth with a brain, making my own opinions. I have no problem with a vaccine being made available. What I have a problem with was when they twist your arm and they take away your livelihood as a threat. They try and closer exempt you from society. And the speed that it happened, and the media propaganda and professionals with different opinions not being allowed to have a platform for debate. Like we're children and we're unable to make our own opinions. We have to be protected from this misinformation because we're too stupid to use critical thinking and come up with our own opinion. If the vaccination was so effective, then what do you care if some idiot is stupid and a conspiracy theorist? Who cares if they don't get vaccinated? They'll catch it. Maybe they'll die. Maybe they'll learn their lesson that way. If you have the vaccination and it's so damn effective, why do you care if somebody else doesn't get it? You're protected. You've taken the vaccine. It's good. It's effective. So when people started coming up with that common sense, the narrative spewing, vomiting out of the media was that it's not about you, it's about others. What do you mean? You're vaccinated, you're protected. So how am I a danger to you? I'm a danger only in myself. That's just what makes, that's how I process it. I don't understand. So people would just vomit out these catchphrases, these simple slogans. Let's check out some stuff. Now, I just popped this up. I just decided to do this pre-recorded session just now. So let me just stop the share screen for a second. Just give me a second, guys. Okay, I'm on the right one. All right. Yeah, I just looked up this quickly. I'd like to look into it further. I really had to get this off my chest. So I just wrote, like, how long does it take for medication to go to human trials? I mean, I heard what my wife said, what people were saying in the preclinical testing facility. You know, maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Excuse me. So let's look at this website, cancersearchuk.org. Give me those cookies, baby. All new drugs and treatments have to be thoroughly tested before they are licensed and available for patients. A new drug is first studied in the laboratory. If it looks promising, it is carefully studied in people. It may be then licensed if the trials show that it works well and doesn't cause too many side effects. You may hear this process called from bench to bedside. There's no typical length of time it takes for a drug to be tested and approved. It might take 10 to 15 years or more to complete all 3 phases of clinical trials before the licensing stage, but this time span varies a lot. Well, I'm sure it doesn't vary from 10 to 15 to under a year. I mean, it's no secret there was like a rushed emergency, vaccination pathway. It's interesting to know that I don't like it when pharmaceutical companies who have all had billion-dollar lawsuits for doing illegal things and scams, when they're exempt from any issues caused by the vaccine. So they can produce the vaccine or rush it through, make billions and billions of dollars. And if there's any side effects or long-term effects that can hurt many people, then you can't go after them. That's what the governments did with the vaccine companies. You realize how much profit Bill Gates made? I think he made $20 billion. I could check that, but it's billions and billions of dollars. So, and when they asked, well, can you guys share the recipe of the vaccination so other countries can produce it? He straight out said, no, because it's all about the money. Believe me, philanthropy. Yeah, right. Clinical trials for rarer cancers often take longer because there are fewer patients available to take part. Research teams from several different countries may need to work together so there are enough patients. The type of treatments. I'm going, I don't want to make this too long. I'm going more after length of time, U.S. Food and Drug, FDA drug review, ensuring drugs are safe and effective. The path of drug travel from a lab to your medicine cabinet is usually long, and every drug takes a unique route. Often a drug is developed to treat a specific disease. An important use of the drug may also be discovered by accident, such as the AIDS. I just want to go where it concentrates. Most drugs that undergo preclinical animal testings never even make it to human testing and review by the FDA. The drugs that do must undergo agency rigorous evaluation process. Here is my issue. Over here goes through all like the phases. Phase 1 study, usually conducted on healthy volunteers. Our goal here is to determine what the drug's most frequent side effects are. Phase 2, phase 3, post-market requirements. Then after, I want to see where it says here. It's the clinical trials that take so long, usually several years. Several years. Bio.org. How long does it take for a drug to get approved? This one's talking. Here are some key takeaways from the new report. On average, it takes 10.5 years for a phase 1 program to progress to regulatory approval. The COVID-19 pandemic opened the world's eyes to the clinical trial process and the importance of investing in research and development to get new drugs to patients. And while the world is grateful for the speed with which the biopharmaceutical industry has developed COVID-19 vaccines and therapeutic, this kind of speed is uncommon, as a new report explains. So I'm seeing a lot around like 10 years. My wife said 7, 5 years. So that's a legitimate concern, especially when we see that younger children were at no danger. They barely had even flu symptoms. Yet so many children got vaccinated. So that's my experience about the coof and the jibby jabby juice given by the good grown-ups that know what we need because we're too stupid to know what we need. I'm literally paranoid about posting this. That's how far freedom of speech has gone right now. But I'll just end by saying, even if I'm a medical professional, I ain't a physician, I ain't a virologist. I'm getting the information on the internet. These are merely my opinions. These are merely my disagreements with certain mandates, not against the vaccine, but against people being coerced into it and their livelihoods being threatened. And I'm against the segregation that was created by the media. I'm upset that professionals were not able to have a platform, only the ones that were following the narrative. And let's finish with the mark of the beast. Like I mentioned before, this is not a spiritual issue. There's just as many Christians that were pro-vaccine as against vaccine. The mark of the beast will not be a medication that people take because they just trust the media. It's a sign of worship. There's many events that have to occur that lead up to the mark of the beast. There needs to be a beast system set up. There needs to be a one world government, one world economic system first. The false prophet, a one world religion, however that may come about. And the leader of this religion will be pushing this mark, which is to worship a man during a period of time where there is global environmental catastrophes happening, civil unrest, nations going against nations, kingdoms against kingdoms. When you look in the Bible, nations, when you look at the Strong Concordance, I use the Blue Letter Bible, nations can also mean ethnicities or races. And we really see this Black Lives Matter, this obsession with racism, even though, yeah, racism existed everywhere. It was definitely a part of the United States, but they worked through it. There's always going to be racist people. So we see ethnic wars starting to occur too. So there's like a timeline of things that have to happen before the mark of the beast can happen. So this has nothing to do with the mark of the beast. But how I saw families and neighbors turn against each other, how I saw comments like, well, these people that aren't unvaccinated shouldn't even be allowed to be admitted in the hospital. These idiots, they're taking up resources. Even heard like on the news, people like, oh, they shouldn't be allowed in grocery stores. And like that passage where people will not be able to buy or sell unless they have the mark of the beast. So no, it's not the mark of the beast. Vaccine is not about it's not religious, it's not spiritual, but the mandates, the government mandates in bed with corporations, with non-elected officials, is disgusting to me. And it's shocking how quickly, in a matter of 365 days, the illusion that we had of freedom popped like a big pussy zit. Have a good night, guys.